To conclude our chapter on 3ds Max user interface, let's examine viewport layouts and also selection display options. In other words, how does an object display when it's selected? First, let's take a look at viewport layouts. We've got a standard 4 viewport panel layout here, but we could choose a different layout, such as maybe having one tall panel and 2 wide panels. And one way to do that is from a toolbar called Viewport Layout Tabs. To make that toolbar visible, right-click on an empty spot on the main toolbar. We get a pop-up menu from which we can choose to show and hide various toolbars. Let's choose Viewport Layout Tabs to make it visible. It should appear on the left-hand side of your screen. And right now there's only one tab available, the Quad 4 layout. To add a new layout, click on the arrow pointing to the right, and then choose the layout you want. And now we've got, as I wished, one tall panel and 2 wide panels. And we can, of course, choose things to load into that panel. So instead of the left view, we can click on that viewport label and choose perspective, and then use the ordinary tools such as Alt and middle mouse to orbit. And of course, I can press the F3 key to display a shaded mode or realistic mode. And when we created that viewport layout tab, we also created a button down here from which we can easily access it. I can switch to the 4 viewport layout to my custom layout instantaneously. We can choose viewport layout options from the configuration dialog as well. Let's hide this toolbar. Right-click on an empty spot of the main toolbar and hide the viewport layout tabs once again. And then to control the viewports from the configuration dialog, go to the little plus sign in any viewport panel and choose Configure Viewports. And in the Layout tab, we can choose from various options. I can click on one of those layouts and click Apply, and it gets loaded. But I can't manipulate anything or change any options in the viewports themselves while this modal dialog is open. So if I wanted to make some changes in the view, I'd have to bomb out of this configuration and then, for example, go over here and switch it over to a wireframe view. Let's go back into the configuration once again. Click on the plus sign, configure viewports, and we can put something else into that panel. Just click there and then choose whatever you want to load. For example, maybe the left view, and then click Apply. All right, so those are the layouts. Let's also talk about the Visual Style and Appearance tab. This has to do with how the viewports are displayed and also how selected objects are displayed. Most importantly, you've got 2 buttons down here. Apply to Active View or Apply to All Views in Active Layout tab. If you make changes here, you probably want to click this button so that all of your viewports will behave the same way, especially regarding, for example, these selection options. For example, let's say I wanted to see selection brackets around selected objects. I would want to enable that switch and then click Apply to All Views and then click OK. Then I can click on an object, but I won't see the selection brackets unless I'm in a shaded view. I can press the F3 key. And now, in a shaded or realistic view, I can see those white selection rectangles or brackets. Go back into that configuration dialog. Try something else. Maybe switch off the selection brackets and switch on Shade Selected Objects. And click Apply to All Views and OK. And this only works in a wireframe view. Give focus to the large viewport and then press F3. And then when I select an object in a wireframe view, it is displayed in shaded. All right, back into that viewport. Once again, configure viewports. You have shade selected faces. That's if you want to see selected polygons highlighted in bright red. The option that I'm going to use actually is display selected with edged faces. And what that will do is, in a wireframe view, selected objects will be highlighted in white, and in a shaded or realistic view, selected objects, wireframes will be highlighted in white, but their shaded surfaces will be in whatever their object color or material color is. Click Apply to All Views and then click OK, and then show this in a shaded view with F3, and selected objects are highlighted with white wires. And that is the option that I prefer. The default option in 3ds Max 2016 is actually different, and it's not found in that configuration dialog. I actually have it disabled for this course, but if you want to use it, I'll show you where it is. It's in Customize Preferences. In the Viewports tab, Selection Preview Highlights. And this is actually on by default. I'll turn it on and click OK. And now selected objects will be highlighted in light blue, and objects that you are possibly about to select are going to be highlighted in bright yellow around their perimeter. And that's called pre-selection highlighting. A selected object is highlighted in bright blue. An object that you could possibly select and that is underneath your cursor will be highlighted in bright yellow. For the remainder of the course, I'm going to use the old school display option here of show selected in edged faces and disable the pre-selection and selection highlighting. Back in Customize Preferences, Viewports, and disable the Selection Preview Highlights. That's a quick rundown of all the display options. One last thing I want to mention is the adaptive degradation switch down here. You might want to turn that off. What that does is it actively degrades the quality of geometry in your view when your viewport performance starts to slow down. And it can be distracting when objects suddenly turn into bounding boxes and so on. So I recommend that you disable that. Let's restore our view back to the defaults. Go back into Configure Viewports, back into Layout, and choose the 4 viewport layout, and click Apply. Click OK. And now we're back at a pretty standardized interface. The only thing I'm really going to do is, just for performance reasons, switch this from realistic to a shaded view. That's how we configure viewports and selection in 3ds Max 2016. And that concludes our chapter on the user interface.